the Federal Lands Initiative is a good example of that, where the long, arduous process for a piece of property to be declared surplus by the government doesn't really quite capture the need. It takes too long, for one, and then the concept of something being surplus. I'll give you an example of a post office in Burnaby. I was standing next to it. It was surrounded by residential towers. It was built in the 60s. It's listed as, the condition of it is listed as poor. Post office keeps losing money. The city wanted it for a developer to build a new tower there. They would give them space on the main floor for a new post office, and the response back was, well, it's not surplus. Is that the highest and best use? You're familiar with the concept of highest and best use in planning, Minister? You're familiar with that, right? So I guess, obviously, we're not thinking in the terms of highest and best use, which I think would be a more appropriate response to a crisis. I'm thinking, too, are you familiar with the project Fisher and Baseline Road here in Ottawa, next to the experimental farm? It's been delayed by the Ministry of Agriculture. I wonder if you've chatted with them about it. 400-hectare farm in the middle of a metropolis of 1 million people. And the Ministry of Agriculture is concerned about a tiny corner of that 400 hectares being affected by shadows, which looks like most of the time will only be in December when things don't really grow in the experimental farm, and yet it's being held up and delays. This is another example of the things that you're saying you're going to try to push municipalities to get out of the way with your accelerator fund, which is, owing more money. But there's all kinds of examples where where the federal government could just get out of the way and let the private sector build, but we make it more expensive. So I'm wondering if you can help me understand that in a crisis, it's literally leaving no stone unturned. And I've given you 2 examples. I can give you another example in the city of Whitehorse, where the city of Whitehorse has been asking. You met with the mayor of Whitehorse last week. I did too. 419 Range Road, home to a really aging federal office building. It's not full. It's surrounded by new schools. The city would like it for housing. They just keep getting told it's not surplus. Is it the highest and best use of that land? Is this the response of a government that recognizes we're in a housing crisis? I'm struggling here.
Well, let me do my best to help put the conversation on track. So first of all, I do believe sincerely that it will take federal investment as well as provincial municipal investments to get out of the housing crisis. I don't view this to being a strategy to spend our way out of the housing crisis. It's a recognition that it's going to take investments, particularly when you're dealing with non-market housing, to actually meet the needs of communities and the families who live within them. I think we have a 30-year experiment of cuts in Canada to affordable housing that have proved conclusively you cannot solve a housing crisis by making cuts, but you certainly can create one, and I vow not to take that approach. Despite our disagreement on the role of the federal government making investments versus cuts to escape the housing crisis, you'll perhaps surprisingly find that I have a lot of agreement with you on the use of federal land, in particular on the issue of the process of declaring surplus certain properties. I've seen the Canada Post Office in Metrotown. I've gone to Burnaby, and I've seen it surrounded by towers that are 40 and 50 stories that could be providing homes to additional people. Of course, Canada Post operates as a Crown Corporation independent of decisions taken by the government of the day, but one of the policies that I intend to review in collaboration with my colleagues is how we can better unlock opportunities for properties that have not yet been declared surplus. Let's not look only at Canada Post Corporation and other Crown corporations, but there are government departments that conduct business that is not necessarily incompatible with housing. I've had a conversation with a number of my cabinet colleagues to identify some of those opportunities. But with respect to your other questions, you've noted a couple other examples in Whitehorse and with the agricultural farm. There may be unique nuances. If you're concerned about the issue that played out with shadows, largely a conversation between Ag Canada and the City of Ottawa, I have put on paper my objection to policies around shadow cover getting in the way of housing. There may be something that needs to be discussed for the operational needs of the agricultural farm, but I'll leave it to my colleague to work that out with the City of Ottawa. But my view is we need to look at every opportunity to reform our policies, including properties that have not been declared surplus, to identify opportunities to build more housing.
Thank you, Mr. H.
We should chat about this after the meeting as well.
Okay, and the clock doesn't end after the meeting. Thank you, Minister.